So while everybody's getting mic'd, I was just going to start with Chris because he's worked 3 years on this film.
3.5, but who's counting? Right?
And I know that you and Brian met each other at Yale, my safety school. But
I'm not offended, don't worry.
I'm kidding. But tell us a little bit as everyone's getting, well, first of all, let me introduce the panel. So sorry. Hold on 2 seconds. Let me make sure.
Everyone knows her.
Yeah.
Yeah. I directed the film.
Yeah. Well, actually, you know what? Here, hold on 2 seconds. Oh, here we go. Sorry, I'm a little verklempt watching this again. It was so emotional and intense, even though I've seen it a number of times, but I've never seen it with an audience, so it was great to be with everybody. So Chris Burke is the director of No Ordinary Campaign and a friend of Brian's. Woo! Next to Chris is Jinsy Andrews, who you saw in the movie as well. She's is a leading doctor in this fight and the director of Neuromuscular Clinical Trials at Columbia University. Tania Simoncelli, is it Simoncelli or Simoncelli? Simoncelli. Okay, is Vice President of Science and Society at CZI. Previously held senior roles at the White House and the FDA. Give Tania a round of applause. And of course, Brian and Sandra. Yeah. Go ahead. So, okay, now, Chris, let's start with you. As I said, you all met in college, and you really reconnected after you learned of Brian's diagnosis. You started just kind of helping out, right? So how did this evolve into this amazing movie?
Yeah, well, it started with, when they launched IMALS in early 2019, Brian reached out and said, hey, I'm launching this nonprofit. Can you come shoot a commercial? It's like, of course, yeah, let's go. And that's actually some of the footage that you saw from that early interview is where he's in the blue dress shirt. And obviously his voice is a lot stronger at that time. That was 2019. So we went through much more than just the script of the commercial. We got into it for a couple of hours about all this stuff, and I'm so glad that we did because we were able to capture really the genesis of this story. And then what happened next was I tagged along to Washington, and somehow Sandra managed to talk our way into the Capitol there and get me in the hallway with Brian filming there at his testimony, which was obviously a very intense experience. And after that, we kind of looked at each other and we're like, well, I guess we're making a documentary now. A couple months later, we were here at Aspen, and Brian was on a panel with Tania. And after that, I met Tania and her colleague, Jeff McGregor from CZI, and we kind of hatched this plan to really make it a big thing, and CZI came on board and supported it. So huge thank you to CZI for making it possible for us to stick with it for 3.5 years. Yeah.
Plus, so cool that you kind of come full circle here. Kind of the idea was hatched in Aspen, and now you are having, this is a work in progress, by the way. The film isn't totally complete.
Technically not fully complete, but pretty close.
Yeah. So, I'm curious why you decided to include other families and why that was so important, not only to you, Chris, as a filmmaker, but I know to Brian and Sandra as well.
Yeah, I think if you look at what they did with IMALS, and so much of it is about, as Sandra says in the film, it grew from just the two of them to everybody else coming on board. So many of the patients and caregivers that you see in the film, and obviously, hundreds or thousands of others who have come on board. And, we really wanted to celebrate that and show that you don't, just because you didn't work in the Obama administration in the White House doesn't mean that you too don't have power. And that's the idea, is we really wanted to show that it's about the community coming together.
The power of this patient advocacy group was just so inspiring. And before I talk to everyone else, Chris, I'm just curious because, you make a film about something like this, and of course you worry that it's honestly too depressing.
Yep.
And was that a concern? I know that, Brian tweeted about this at one point. And I'm just curious how he said, this is Brian's tweet. One may assume that a documentary about ALS is sad. It does have its moments of sadness. It is, however, a story about victory after victory in the face of seemingly impossible odds. And at its core, it is a story about love and hope, two things we all need more of these days. Amen to that, brother. But so how did you kind of balance, because I do think it's so hopeful and inspiring at the end of the film, but was that something that you thought about as you put all this incredible footage? And by the way, the footage is so moving because it's so intimate. And you obviously, Sandra and Brian really trusted you. I mean, he let you basically be in the shower with him, Chris.
Well, to be fair, and to credit Sandra, she shot that on her phone. She told me, she's like, I just uploaded a clip of Brian in the shower, but it's PG, don't worry. But yeah, I mean, I think that is a big concern. I think, as usual, Brian said it better in his tweet than I possibly could, but just to expand on that a little bit, first of all, it's easier when you have a guy like him around. I mean, there were a lot of laughs because of all the funny things that he says, and of course, I love the dynamic of the two of them together. It's endlessly amusing, even in the darkest moments. But I think that's what's so important, is that's what they're fighting for and what we're all fighting for.
And let's talk basically about this the CZI role in all this, Tania, because Rare as One is really helping patients with a variety of rare diseases. So can you explain what it is and sort of the mission behind Rare as One?
Sure. So first of all, just thank you so much. It's so amazing to be here for this moment, for just being friends with and having become friends with Brian and Sandra through this process, and watching their journey these last 3 years, just absolutely extraordinary and such an amazing moment this evening. So the Rare as One project it's premised on the idea that patients are the most motivated stakeholders in the health research ecosystem and really hold the key to driving progress against disease. And I would say that's true for all disease, but it's especially true for rare diseases that are grossly neglected for the most part. It's important to understand that rare diseases, while they're really rare individually, they're actually quite common collectively. So there are more than 7,000 rare diseases, and they affect 30 million Americans, or 400 million people around the globe. And for all of those diseases, there are fewer than 5% of these diseases have any FDA-approved therapies. Just think about that for the moment. Like, how do you even start to sort of really drive progress against these diseases? What we believe at CZI is we have to really work on bolstering the power of patient communities to overcome the disincentives in the ecosystem to actually study these diseases. So we work to leverage and support the power of patient communities to accelerate progress by helping them to build strong, inclusive patient communities, to help them engage researchers and activate researchers in their disease areas, attract them to their disease areas, and partner with industry to drive the development of treatments and cures, and raise funds for research. Some of the work that you just saw that Brian and Sandra have been doing over the last 3 years.
And really, you were attracted to these two because you thought that this could be a playbook. The way they approached ALS could be a playbook for so many different rare diseases, and that's what's wonderful about CZI. You share all the knowledge and the resources and the experiences and the successes and the failures with a whole group of patient advocates.
Yes, so one of the things that we're doing is we're funding a whole network of rare disease organizations, and one of the things that's been really amazing to watch is the way that they're learning from one another, and that there's this incredible network effect that if you can fund groups and encourage them and galvanize collaboration across the community, that they can make a lot more progress together faster. And it was one of the things that really inspired me to fund IMALS, because I'll never forget the first time that I met Brian. He came into my office. It was 6 months post his diagnosis, and he sat down and within 5 minutes was telling me the story about how he had just spent the last 6 months going around the country and meeting every single stakeholder in the space, every ALS organization, meeting with researchers and clinicians and industry people, and really just trying to understand what is needed to drive progress in this disease. And he didn't want to duplicate efforts. He knew that that was a problem in rare disease advocacy. And he said, like, it's not really a new disease, another organization that's needed. What we really need to do is build a movement. He wanted to galvanize collaboration across the community. And I was so inspired that he had that foresight and that he was thinking along the same lines that I was starting to think about. And we hadn't launched the Rare as One project yet, but I was thinking, how can we encourage collaboration across the rare disease community, thus Rare as One, the idea that we should really build advocacy capacity and build the capacity of groups to work together as one community, not as 7,000 individual rare diseases.
Meanwhile, Jinsy, you have been in this battle for a long time. Jinsy and I met when I was anchoring the CBS Evening News in 2009. I did a piece on Project ALS, and she took a tissue sample from my arm because she was growing healthy stem cells, mine were, I hope, healthy, and then comparing them to ALS stem cells and seeing how various treatments would work one against the other. You know, you say you're hopeful about the future of ALS. Can you tell us a little more, Jinsy, why? And I'm curious, having watched this after several viewings, you know, has Act for ALS started to change I guess the progression of the disease for people with ALS?
Yeah, it's a good question. And first, I'm happy you still want to talk to me after I did the skin biopsy on you. Super thrilled. But, you know, there is a lot of reasons to be hopeful. And, you know, it's true what you heard in the film. You know, 5 years ago, we didn't have as much as we do today. So each year, exponentially, we move forward and push forward. And it's largely in part of what IMALS and what Brian has done and Sandra has done to really pull the community forward. With that Act for ALS, the testimony that was done in Congress and the movement to pull not just the people living with ALS and their families and their friends, but also the scientists, the government agencies, I think that was something that, you know, all the parts were there, but somebody or something had to catalyze that moment. And that's what you guys did, and probably roped me into the process, and you don't take no for an answer. So I think the one thing is that having Act for ALS signed into legislation showed the power of our community, but also, as we talked about with before, was the power of getting the rare diseases together to provide a playbook, really. The second, when you ask me about hope, where's that hope? I mean, people living with ALS are looking for hope. Also, the people providing care for those living with the disease need hope to stay motivated. It's tough. You know, I've sat through public hearings with the FDA. I've sat through multiple congressional testimonies from people I take care of, and when they die, every loss it hurts. And so I have to find hope. And so in the last 2 years alone, the increase in federal funding has allowed us to look into the biology of the disease, and that biology can really lead to understanding, as you heard in the film, to unlock other diseases that will touch all of us at some point in our lives: Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, MS even. But one of the major breakthroughs is learning about the genetics of ALS, and although, as you saw Chris Snow in the film, he is 1 to 2% of all ALS, having a therapy that can halt his disease helps us unlock and figure out how to help all of the other types of ALS. In my career, actually in the history of ALS, we have never, ever had anyone survive ALS. I mean, that's the big picture here. When you're looking at this film, you saw Chris Snow. He might be able to beat this disease and survive it. I mean, that's where we are today, and that's why I think it's important, why this film is important. Really, I felt very motivated and enthusiastic about being part of it, because I think if not just the people who are in that space, but everybody else who comes to this film or who sees it, who may not know what ALS is, if we can harness all that energy, boy, we don't have to wait 10 years from now.
And Chris Snow is in that subset. Is there a chance, Jinsy, that this kind of targeted gene therapy, as we discover more and more genetic mutations for a whole host of diseases, that will be you can apply that to a larger and larger population of ALS patients?
that's the hope. It's when you find, so in ALS, we are learning about new genetic mutations in an exponential way each year, so more genes. And it might not just be purely the gene that causes the disease, which is in about 10% of people, but in the 90%, there might be a gene that modifies the disease. So the technology is here today, and the platforms that we use, like antisense oligonucleotides and other viral vectors. I got to say, I mean,
I know how to pronounce that too. I had to
I'm the
learn.
scientist. I gotta say those words. But the technology is there, and so if we're able to apply it for those small subsets, and then we can discover new genes that modify the disease in ALS for those that have quote unquote sporadic forms, which is 90% of ALS, what we learn in that small subset can be a game changer for that sporadic group of people.
So Brian and Sandra, you probably think I'm ignoring you, but I'm not. In the movie, Brian, you say, "Is this insane? Why am I not at home with my kids right now?" So looking at this film, of course you can't think it's insane, but what kept you going when things were really, really tough? I mean, you and Sandra have been relentless. And I mean, where did you get that commitment and that dedication and that, indefatigable spirit to continue, Brian and Sandra, because this is obviously the two of you?
I will say, one thing I have to say is that this is insane. Otherwise, Sandra will kill me. But the reality is, I am hopeful, and I am driven to never stop fighting because of the community that we have around us that has taken up the torch and shown the world what is possible when you tell your story, when you open up your heart and your mind to the possibility that we could actually end this disease. I really want to thank the patients who are in the room today. Also Nicole and Sadie, who you saw in the movie, are here with us today. Can you guys stand up for a moment? When you look at Nicole and you realize that she lost her husband a few years ago, and she is still fighting every day for me and for thousands of others. How can you not keep fighting?
Sandra, when I watched this film, a number of times, part of me wanted to hear more from you about what it's like to be a caregiver and what it's like to be a partner. And then I thought, and we saw you very intimately. We saw you on the kitchen floor when you were making dinner, I think. And then I thought it was sort of beautiful to show, not tell, and to see your devotion to each other, not just one way, but to each other. But having said that, now I would love to hear a little more from you, Sandra, about what has kept you going, what gives you strength, and how you're able to manage sort of what is some very, very difficult days and huge responsibility, like sticking that needle in Brian's heart. I mean, I felt for you. I
Was
couldn't
his
have.
heart? The heart's on the other side.
Okay. I couldn't do that. But I mean, can you talk a little bit about what this journey has been like for you?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm not medically inclined, so that is really hard for me. I can't even look at someone drawing my own blood, let alone, as many ALS patients know, Radicava is this infusion therapy, and you need to get a port, and then you can't breathe on the port because it could get infected, and then you could kill your person just by like infecting the thing that's supposed to help slow. I mean, it's just like, it's a nightmare, a bleep nightmare. And that has been medically a challenging part for me in general. But, you know, I don't know, every family's different. One thing that I feel I like to say out loud is I hear this phrase that it's an honor to be a caregiver. And I worry about that because and maybe there are people who authentically feel that way, but I think caregiving is a fucking nightmare. And I hate it. You have to watch the person you love die slowly, and then you have to become an extension of their body. And it is a fucking nightmare. And I just don't want caregivers to feel, in addition to everything else that they're feeling, to have this burden of being like, oh, it's an honor. No. Like, no, that's not fair. Like, we need them to be okay. And so, you know, maybe Brian and I operate a little differently. Like, people are afraid to say that because then they think, oh my God, does that suggest that I don't love my person? I don't want my person to feel like a burden. So it's like, Brian, this is really hard for me, and you better not fucking die on me, right? So it's like, I will say both. Like, both can be true. It can be really hard, and like, I love you aggressively. Like, you know, so I just, I've tried to be kind of honest about that, but I don't know.
You guys are just an incredible couple, and I feel like, as I said, it really is a love story. And what do you hope the story will teach healthy people too? You know, people who aren't struggling with illness about this kind of unconditional love.
My hope is everyone will see the film and realize that this is not a what issue? Political issue. This is not a scientific issue. This is about people's lives and how we can all, how we can change the course of a disease and that has been fatal for 160 years. So my hope is that we will come together to do something amazing. That is what we dream of. And we do have the chance to do it here. And I look forward to being 80 years old and just sitting on my porch in a rocking chair, drinking dark and stormies every day. That's a perfect way to end this conversation, but I do want to, first of all, did you all like the film?
Yes, good job.
I wanted to take audience questions, but unfortunately we don't have time, but I want to leave you with how you can get involved with this incredible organization, how you can continue to support the work of everyone sitting up here on this stage. And so how can people keep the momentum going? How can they spread the word? How can they get other people involved? What can we do to be with you?
Two things, two simple things. Number one, go to the film website and sign up for the mailing list so we can make you a part of this community. And number two, and go to imals.org and sign up there. Because what we do, we bring in people who never thought they would be fighting ALS and give them the tools to actually change the world. So if each one of us, has the power to change the world, it's just a question of if we want to do it for ALS. I just want to add, I hope this movie is accessible to everybody because, like Tania said, everybody in this audience has a family member who's had a serious illness. And healthcare is going to change so much, and so much of what's going to change is going to be because of patients. So if anything in your life is touched by a serious illness, and if anything you saw in our journey, in our film, inspires you to run through brick walls the way this community has, and use any part of our playbook and like just transform that space the way we've transformed this space and continue to, like, that's a huge win for us. And then like just fully stepping back, these are hard times. And I think that if you see that every day Brian is getting up and fighting, whatever you're going through, you can get up and you can fight and you can appreciate the sunshine, especially in Aspen. And I hope that that sticks with everybody.
Well, thank you all so much, and thank you for coming.